Welcome back for another episode of Ironworker Survey and Layout. Today we're going to be storing some control. We're going to be using these poles with Trimble 360 prisms on top. As you can see, this control point here already existed, but it's been hit by equipment a bunch of times, so we're going to have to recollect it if we want to use it again. I'm sinking the legs in and using the little thumb buttons there on the bipod to get that bubble centered up. Now, whenever you have that big 360 on the top and you look straight down, you can't see the bubble. So here's a little trick I use. You want to look at that bubble from two 90s. So look at it from straight on and then turn your head 90 degrees and look at it from a side, directly from one side. So that way you'll be able to get that bubble centered up without having to look straight down on it. So I'm looking straight on the front, and now I'm looking from the side. The camera is on the right side of my head, so that's why it looks like I'm off centered, but that's how you want to do it. Just look from two 90-degree angles onto that bubble. And now I'm going to measure the rod height. I don't really use these 360s for elevation too much unless it's a pretty flat shot, but we're gonna address that, and I'll show you how I do that. But I'm just putting the rod height in, so it's pretty close. I really don't need to store the rod height at this point for what I'm gonna do. But alright, so here's the other control point. This was a piece of rebar I pounded in the ground yesterday, and now we're going to collect it off of the same setup as that other one. I'm about 75 yards to the west of the last spot we were just looking at. Same deal. I'm just going to get bubbled up, looking at that bubble from two 90-degree angles, using the thumb buttons to adjust the bipod. Alright, so there it is. Okay, so now I'm up where I'm going to be setting up the total station. I can see both of my prisms from up here. I know you can't in the video, but... So I've found a spot where I can set up the tripod and I can see two control points. Now I need to make sure that my setup is wide enough so that the new control I'm going to be storing is inside of the envelope of that setup. I wouldn't be able to, for example, do 100 feet worth of check-in and then store some control 300 feet away. That wouldn't be very accurate. You want to have a much wider setup than the distance to your shot. So I'm going to be getting about a 600-foot setup, and I'm only going to be shooting about 300. So that's how you want to be doing it. So now I'm just going to use the tripod legs and adjust that bubble, get it fairly close. Doesn't have to be perfect right now, just so it's close enough. Alright, so I turned on the tablet, and I'm going to turn on the total station with the power button right there on the side. And then there's that countdown you got to wait for in order for it to connect. I'm going to skip ahead here. Alright, so I'm going to hit the device button at the top, and then I'm going to turn on the radio, and then I'm going to hit the connect button there on the bottom right. I'm going to speed up this connecting process. This can take a little bit. Alright, so there we have our two banners. We're going to just close those out. And looking at that bubble in the bottom center there, I'm going to adjust the thumb screws on the tri-brac. and get that bubble centered up. If you notice, I have the total station turned so it's pointing directly away from me and in between two of the tri-bract screws. That's going to orient the bubble on the screen and make it easier to get centered up. Alright, so that's pretty good there. So I'm going to hit the device button again, and then I'm going to head over to my first control point. Just going to roughly point the total station at that area. And here I am. Put that on the center of my mark. And this is point number 495. So I'm going to go into the map here, find 495, get the prism pointed right at the total station, level up, and hit the trigger on the top right there. Now I've stored that point. I'm going to head over to my other and perform the same operation with this one. Now the total station is still pointed over at control point 495. So I'm going to use the control and rotate it towards myself. I'm going to hit the button on the left middle, and now I can adjust the total station, and I'm turning it to the left. Once I get a lock, that top left icon will stop spinning and will show a solid just like that. So now I know I've got a lock. Now I'm going to zoom out and find this control point, which is 490. Point it right at the total station, get leveled up, and pull that trigger on the top right. Okay, there we've got a result. Instrument position is within 1/16. It shows there on the bottom, and it's showing both of our angles are excellent. So this will be a good setup to use for storing some control. I'm going to hit the set button there on the bottom right. Now I need to reference elevation. We need to make sure that we have elevation associated with those two control points. We already know this control point's elevation. It's written right on it, so I'm going to adjust the reference elevation. Make sure the prism's angled directly at the total station, and when I get a level bubble, I'm going to hit the measure button. There we go. We have our elevation referenced. Now I'm just going to double check this elevation. I've got a 107-foot mark on the wall. I'm going to change my rod height to 0 because I'm going to take the prism out of the bracket. Just hold it directly on my 107-foot mark. Now all of my grid lines are at 0 feet, so I'm going to select the grid line option there. It's going to be that double line, and just pick any grid line. It's anything. I can use anything that's at 0 feet. This is going to tell me the elevation from that point. So there's 106 feet, 11 and 15/16, and I'm holding it on a 107-foot benchmark, so I'm only a 16th off. So I've got a 16th inch check-in on elevation and with instrument location. So I'm going to go ahead and store that control now. I'm going to turn to the first one, and I need to change the prism because I am using mini circle for the setup. Now I need to change it to 360 to store these, and that is the rod height that I had measured earlier, so I'm just going to leave that. Okay, so now I've got the 360 prism selected, and you can see I'm locked on to something out there. It doesn't know where it is yet. I'm going to hit collect. I'm going to change the name of it to 815 just because I think that's the next one in order. Okay, And when I'm ready, I'm going to hit the trigger, and there we go. We've stored that rebar stake, 815. Alright, now I'm going to turn the total station over to the other one. Once it gets a lock, there we go. So you see 219 is already stored there, but we know it got bumped. So let's have a look at how far it got bumped. So I'm going to go to Layout, and as you can see there, it got moved 2 3/8 by 7/8, so it got moved a good bit. Elevation stayed pretty good though. So I'm going to restore this, so I'm going to hit Collect and change it to 219A. Just so I know it's the newest one. Alright, and then I'm going to hit the trigger. Okay, so we stored the new 219. Okay, so now because I am shooting downhill at that prism, and the 360 doesn't have the ability to be angled up towards the gun, I'm just going to fine tune. I'm going to change it back to the mini circle, and I'm going to put in the rod height for this. This prism allows me to angle it directly at the gun. I just want to make sure that I'm shooting right down the barrel of that prism when I'm storing elevation. So I'm going to go and enter that new rod height, and I've got the mini circle selected. And now I'm going to make sure that the prism is angled directly at the total station, and just check what that elevation is. We've got 84, 8, and 3/8. So I'm going to go into Point Manager, go to Create, and then Point Manager, and find our point number 815, because that's the one we want to edit. Got it selected there. I'm going to hit the Edit button there in the middle, which is the pencil and paper. I'm going to change that elevation to what we just read, 84 feet, 8 and 3/8 inches. I'm going to hit Apply Edits to save that. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing over at 219. I'm going to use the Turn To feature. Now that the total station is located, you can just have it rotate directly to point number 219, so you don't have to search for it. Now I've got a lock, check the layout, and going to angle directly at the total station. This was a bit more of a shallow angle, so it's probably not affected. 85, 4 1/8. Go into that Create Point Manager, find 219. (219A), edit, and 85.345 is 85 4 1/8, so it's not going to let me change it. I'm just going to exit out of this, and we have our 2 control points collected in our data collector, so we can use them for future setups. So with the way job sites are, control is always getting bumped and lost or covered up, or just can't be used because a wall got built. Just all sorts of different things happen to control, like this 219 here got hit. So I'm just taking some extra steps to, let equipment operators know that it's here. I put rope around it and painted it orange, so that should help for a little bit. And then I go ahead over and do the same thing on our new 815. Put up a rope around it and paint it orange. So this helps, but you don't always count on it always being there. So it's good to have a lot more control than you think you're going to need, because there will be times where you think you're going to get a particular setup and one of the points is either no longer there, or it's obstructed, or any number of things has happened to it. So just be very proactive with your control. Alright, well that's it for this time. I hope you learned something.